Okay, is everybody ready? Okay. So thanks everyone for coming. Hopefully the break room will give us enough room to for everybody to have some space. But so as you can see, we're just going to talk a little bit about food safety. That's kind of the emphasis we're going to have, especially because we're starting the school year again. We want to kind of review all these topics. So we'll go over a lot of these concepts that many of you are already familiar with, but obviously it's a good refresher. But if anybody has any questions throughout or any comments, feel free to speak up or say anything. So first we'll just start with just sort of basic intro of what we're going to talk about today. First we're just going to talk about expectations, the handbooks and where to find them, important contact informations that'll be helpful for you guys, and then the rest of the schedule for the training. So as far as packaging, food safety, and then the practice that we're going to do at the end. Okay, so sorry, I already skipped that slide, but because we are in the break room behind you guys, you can see all of the different employee rights, all of the food safety handouts, all of the important contacts like poison control, emergency contacts, stuff like that. Those things are never going to change, obviously, so as far as safety things are concerned, those will always be there for you to reference. As far as physical safety in the warehouse, I've just compiled this pretty simple list of just the different components that help us to all be safe while we're working. A lot of these start with just being physically prepared before going in. So because we do lift a lot of heavy things, and every week we get our food order that has full boxes, lots of milk crates, and after we package all the meals, there's these big heavy crates that we're moving to and from the van. We just want to make sure that we're really careful with how we are picking things up, how we're moving them, and how we're handling it in general, just to make sure that we're not causing any injuries that could impact our work in the future. So there's not a lot of tools that we use in the warehouse, obviously, except for the fridges. That's a main thing, and then different knives or box openers and stuff like that we use throughout the warehouse. But a lot of those are pretty self-explanatory. So with the fridges, just be careful with the ramps because they can be slippery, and then with the box cutters, they have a protective side, so just make sure to always use them in the correct direction. Yes.
So I just wanted to ask, so with all the cleaning supplies, I guess, is there anything that we need to be cautious of that way when we're cleaning the warehouse or anything like that?
Yeah, that's great. So
any chemicals?
Yeah, so the things that we're going to use in the warehouse are honestly pretty standard, pretty simple, right? So a lot of just disinfectants for the tables, cleaning things for the bathroom, stuff like that. So there's not a whole lot of chemicals that actually go in because we're not washing dishes. We don't have any dishes or cutlery that we're reusing and stuff, because everything's going out to the schools. We don't get a lot of stuff in return. So the main thing that we're cleaning is the tables. So as far as poison control is concerned, that's mostly if something's being ingested, which I hope nobody's drinking the stuff. But in reality, that stuff should be pretty self-explanatory. We're washing the tables before and after all the food prep to make sure that everything is kept sanitary, and that we're making sure that the tables are dry before we start preparing food on them. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Good question. Okay, so then cross-contamination or hygiene. Because most of the foods that we already have here are packaged, so they already come in a protective covering, we don't have a huge issue with cross-contamination. The biggest thing is just making sure that we're not bringing anything from home or from our car, from our phone, stuff like that will contaminate the food that we're working with. So that's our biggest type of cross-contamination issue. Cooler or freezer safety, kind of talked about that just with the ramps. Everybody should know by now that the fridges and freezers do not lock. So if you are inside and the fridge closes, you just push them open and they open right up. So if you were alarmed, I'm sure you figured out quickly that they do open up. Yes.
So we give out fresh fruit, right?
Yes, yeah, we do.
So I don't really know the procedure. Do we wash the fruit before we give it to the schools, or are they responsible to wash?
Yeah.
Like apples?
No, that's a great question. So because of the nature of our facility, we actually don't wash the fruit just because we're not allowed to prepare food in any way, and so we don't have a space to wash that fruit. That's a great question. So at the schools, if they want to wash their fruit, then they have the capacity to do it there, but because we don't have a set up sink and stuff like that, we don't wash the food. We just get it and then repackage it for the kids. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's a great question. Okay, first aid. So everybody knows the first aid kit is, so in the break room where we are, it's under the under the cabinet over there. And then there's also a fire extinguisher over by the coolers on the other side. I'm sure everyone has seen that by now. And then as far as CPR, everybody's been CPR trained. If not, then Dina will be coming back through to do CPR training later in the year. And then important phone numbers were included on the one before, so everyone knows 911, for emergencies, and then poison control, which is posted with the rest of the bulletins. Okay. So paperwork, this is kind of the preliminary steps to overall food safety. Is we just want to make sure we're understanding where the food is coming from, where it's being stored, and where it's going. So this starts with the order that gets placed every week, making sure that all the food is has arrived from the order, and making sure that when we package things, we're packaging what's on the menu, and then we're writing on the inventory what's going out. So just kind of those few steps, you can just kind of think of where it's coming from, where it's being stored, and where is it going. And then always, reporting everything on the inventory to make sure that we're keeping an accurate count of food. This also helps us to keep track of expiration dates so that we're not using spoiled food, stuff like that. Okay. So packing meals. So everybody knows what the crates look like. I put a picture on here you guys can see. For a couple of you this might be new, but the biggest thing with these crates is that they're collapsible. So they're really efficient. They don't take up very much space, especially when we're out delivering. We want to be able to collapse these down when we're done so that we can reach all the food we need. That way we don't miss any crates that have food in them. The other really important thing with these is that we need to be careful to not overpack the crates. The biggest issue is that if we have people that are packing them too high, so say you have a school you're working on and they have 45 meals that need to fit for the school. In reality, maybe only 38 or 40 meals fit in the crate, but you're tempted to just stuff all 45 in there just so that you don't have to bring out another crate and put another one in the van. The issue is that if these are not packed down tightly enough, you put another crate on there, it's not going to lock tightly. So as soon as the van takes a turn or has to speed up or anything, the whole crate is going to go down with whatever's on top or below it, and all the food ends up spilling all over the van. So then when you open the door to the van, all the food spills out on the ground. So then not only do you have contaminated food because it's been on the floor or the ground, but you also don't know where the food was, which crates it came from, which schools it goes to, and which bags that it fell out of. So this is super important. The only way to ensure that we aren't losing track of food is to make sure that we do not overpack the crates. So in order to keep our food safe and uncontaminated after we've packaged them, make sure that if you need to use 2 crates, that's fine. Just make sure that they're both a little bit smaller and evenly distributed and labeled so that we can keep track of that food. Then obviously when you do finish packaging a meal, label it so we know exactly which school it's going to and for which day. And then leftovers, obviously we package or we take care of those separately. just because a lot of those foods will come back to us expired. And so we want to make sure that we're not putting those back into the fridges or onto the shelves that are no longer good for use and then we can't use anymore. So make sure you're being aware of that. Yes.
So how can we make sure that we use the old food first before we use the new stuff?
Great. So I'm not sure if any of you guys have noticed the X's that we put on the boxes. Have you noticed that? You haven't been here very long, but
I think I've seen them. Yeah, I didn't know what they mean.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah, it's something we should talk about. So the X's on the boxes basically just means that those were the food items that came out first. The ones that we received first. So when we get a new order each week, if we have a repeated item coming in, then we will put an X on the box that was already there, so that when you need that item, you pull that one out first. Is everybody familiar with the FIFO principle? No? Oh, some of you? Okay. So it stands for first in, first out. So when you get an order, you're going to put it in the very back, so that when you do have to package a meal, when you get a certain item, you're pulling out what's been in there the longest. So first in, first out. And then the stuff that comes in the order, obviously, gets stored in the back so that you use the older stuff first before getting to the new stuff. That makes sure that we're not using expired food, and it also makes sure that we're not having an excess amount of waste. Any other questions about that? Okay. All right. Just got a few more here. This is pretty basic just because we don't have a lot of actual preparation with the food. But overall food safety concepts we're going to focus on is cleaning. So making sure that the surfaces, the counters that we use, the tables we use are cleaned before we start using food, that our hands are washed before we put gloves on, and then we always put gloves on. Separate, so we want to make sure that we keep food separate as much as possible if they need to be. So if things are individually packaged, like some of the bagels sometimes come individual, we need to keep those separate. So if we are going to have to touch things with our hands, we're going to want to use separate gloves when we touch something packaged. Cook or prepare. Obviously we don't cook anything, but when we're preparing, we want to make sure that we're keeping the refrigerated and freezer items on the table for the least amount of time as possible. And after we do package a meal, we don't want to just leave the food sitting on the table, right? We want to put it back in the fridge as soon as possible, just to make sure that we're keeping that steady, consistent temperature. Make sure nothing drops that way. Okay. All right, so the simulation, we're going to do the little practice. A lot of you have done this, I think, before. But we're going to break into teams of 2. So one person, you guys can just pick who you want to team up with. But so what we're going to do is basically do an entire simulation of packaging, loading, marking all the paperwork, putting the destination in, and driving to the school, unloading the meals, and returning to the warehouse. And then also, I didn't put it on here, but also unpacking the leftovers. So this is just an entire overrun of what we're going to, pretty much what we do in a normal day, to make sure that we're all understanding the concepts of food safety, so that we are on the same page that way. And then through that, we'll give points based on safety, efficiency, accuracy, and communication. So we are going to separate into teams of 2, but me and Sylvia and Lisa are all going, right? No, is that okay? Okay. Yeah, so the 3 of us are going to go with each of the teams and make sure that we're keeping track of the points and how we're scoring as far as that goes. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay. And then I'll just go over this last recap before we do the simulation, just so we're on the same page. So we talked about the physical safety, making sure that we're lifting the correct ways, being careful with the different cleaning agents we have, that we're always cleaning if we need to. Paperwork, making sure we're keeping track of where the food is coming from, where it's being stored, and where it's going. Preparing food, pretty much just keeping everything cool as long as possible. And then overall food safety, just making sure that we're keeping things in the van, that the van is at the right temperature before we put food in, and that we're taking it to the school and putting it in the coolers as soon as possible. Okay, so we can jump to the simulation now unless anybody has any final questions. Those were some good questions during, but...
I had one.
Yeah.
So, this is because I'm new, but what items do we put in the fridge and what items do we put in the freezer?
Yeah. So this makes it a little bit easier because whenever we get our order each week, Nicholas is our food vendor, so they will automatically put all the freezer items into the freezer and all the fridge items into the fridge. So we don't really have to worry about that too much, but pretty much the only thing that goes in the fridge are our dairy products, so like yogurts, cheeses, cream cheese, ranch, stuff like that, and then our fruit. We leave the pears out so they can ripen, and then everything that gets put in the freezers are like our main grain components, muffins, the pizza kits, the Uncrustables, stuff like that. But you don't have to worry too much about it. If something's in the freezer, that's because Nicholas put it there and it has to be kept in the freezer. But after you do package something, everything goes back into the fridge. So just because it has a freezer item in it doesn't mean that crate needs to go in the freezer. Always put it in the fridge because it gives it time for it to defrost before it gets to the school.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Great. Okay. All right, so let's start our simulation unless anyone has any final questions. Okay, great. Okay, we'll get started. Thanks, guys, for coming.